My name is Risa Jane S. Atizo,
And I am Charlene Andricosa,
your future educators. So as part of our activity in English 1, we are going to interview one beginning teacher, one experienced teacher, and one veteran teacher.
Come and join us as we learn more about instructional planning.
Hi everyone, my name is Jane Rose Hika Ambako.
And I am Aladdin A. Barong.
Today, we are going to interview Mr. Louis J. Barong.
He is 1 year of teaching experience. Currently, he is assigned as grade 7 advisor at Ginayuran National High School.
Good morning, sir. We're going to ask you several questions.
What common issue have you experienced in your profession before the pandemic?
Are the common issues that I ever faced in my teaching career or my teaching profession up to now is for me it is all about the delivery of the lesson. When we talk about delivery of the lesson, it is part of the teacher already on how he or she are going to deliver the lesson and to make it sure or to assure the learnings of the learners. And it is a big part for me, and it is hard and complicated because before I always do face diverse learners, where as a teacher it is a great job and responsibility for me to cater the learning needs and capabilities, especially in times of pandemic, where I have to do lots of supplemental activities just to cater the learning needs. So delivery of the lesson is really the common issue that I've ever faced so far in my teaching career.
How did you cope up with this issue?
As what I said a while ago, that I must cater the learning needs of my diverse learners. So with that, I really do supplemental activities like activity sheets, performance activities, portfolios, and etc. So for that and with that, I could really assure their learning abilities are catered. And before, when we do the face-to-face, I do differentiated instruction where I do the hands-on activities, the oral recitation, project-based, and etc. So that with that strategies or with that techniques, I could really assure to myself that their learning needs are really catered or assured.
How do you consider yourself as a teacher? Beginning, developing, or proficient?
I do consider myself as a teacher because since then it is really my passion to teach. It is really my passion to change the life and transform the learners or the children. Secondly, I do consider myself as a teacher for being flexible. Because being a teacher is not easy. There are lots of roles that you're going to take up or to be. Just like teacher can be also be called nurse, because you have to heal wounds of your learners if they're wounded. Secondly, teacher can be also be a singer, even if they can sing, but they do sing. A dancer, they do dance even if they can't dance. Teachers can also be a parent, because teachers are not only to teach but also to care their learners and treat them as their sons and daughters. And actually there are lots of roles of being a teachers, and it's a great job to be flexible enough to be called a teacher. And the last thing that I consider myself as a teacher is being competent, because what you teach to your learners might change their life or might bring that learnings to their entire life. So you must, as a teacher, you must be competent enough to know of what you are teaching to your learners or students.
What are the components of instructional planning?
So what are the components of the instructional planning? So before we go to the components of instructional planning, so let's define first what is instructional planning. Well, instructional planning is a guide to your instruction, where this consists of the objectives, the subject matter, the learning materials to be used, and most especially the techniques and strategies that you're going to use. So that is instructional planning, you are planning for your instruction. Now, when we talk about components of the instructional planning, it's something to do with the lesson information, the topic, where what topic we're going to use, where there's lesson information and the topic. This consists already the objectives of the lesson, what you are going to teach, where secondly the performance standards, where in planning an instruction or the lesson, there is really standards in standards that you're going to follow just like in the performance standards, and also the content standards. There are standards in following you should follow the content standards in making instructional planning. And also the activities, the learning activities that you're going to use, you should plan that ahead. You should include that in the components of instructional planning. And evaluation, that's already fall in the learning activities. And what's more, that's all what I've known on the components of instructional planning.
What do you think are the most important component in instructional planning and why?
So what is the most important components of instructional planning? Well, I might consider this as the most important component of instructional planning is the objectives. Because when we talk about the lesson information or the objectives, because when we talk about the objectives, objectives is your goal or your target to your learners. So you can proceed to other components if you don't have the objectives, because objectives serves as your guide on your teaching, on your lesson. So where in objectives, that states there on the performance, the content, on the learning outcomes of your learners, on what are expected from the learners after the lesson. So objectives is the most important components on instructional planning.
Thank you, sir. We have learned so much from you.
God bless and stay safe.
Hello and good morning everyone. I'm Angeline Akil
And I am Charlene Andricoso.
and today we're going to interview Mrs. Banden Butch L. Marco.
She has 4 years of teaching experience. Currently, she is assigned as a kindergarten teacher at Kabatbanagan Elementary School.
Good morning ma'am. We're here to ask you some questions. So, what is the common issues that you experience in your profession even before the pandemic?
Being in service, the common issue that I always encounter in my profession would be having learners with no reading background, that not even letters, they can recognize the letter names and the letter sound, which somehow caused me a bit pressure on how to handle them, especially they are not excused to their age to be left behind of not learning reading.
How did you cope up with these kind of issues?
I was still able to cope up such issue that I always thought of myself that teachers must be tough and must always have ways. So the moment that it strikes me, I always think of something to address the said issue. Just like today that we are experiencing this threat of COVID-19, I crafted a reading material that will somehow ease the burden of our dear parents. For we all know that it is also hard for them since teaching is not their profession. So with that, I am not just one who benefit it, but also the parents.
How do you consider yourself as a teacher? Beginning, developing, or proficient?
So considering that I'm already a 4-year teacher in service, I would still include myself to developing teacher. Yes, for all I know, I'm still in a process of learning different relevant strategies in handling diverse learners. And at the same time, there are a lot of things that I need to be learned, especially the evolution of learners' learning pace is excruciating, that a teacher needs to embark the new trend of the of a 21st century learners.
And what are the components of instructional planning?
As a teacher, you always have to be mindful of your instructional planning. Well, a part of that, you must consider your lesson, as if you already figured it out, that possible outcome of the lesson, considering the learner's characteristics towards learning. Plan ahead by knowing in advance exactly what you want your learners to grasp by the end of the lesson. Next is your objectives. These must be attainable. Before you go further with your lesson, you must communicate this to your learners right at the beginning of the lesson. It could be verbal or in written, and then paste it somewhere. Make connections also between learners to your previous and prior learning or both, to prepare them for new concept. Then, of course, delivery of lesson or the presentation. It must be in direct instruction, but clear, of course. Also, don't forget to use sense of humor as you teach, for it goes a long way in keeping students engaged in a conducive learning space. Then learners practice. Most likely, I use the explicit learning strategy in here. Like the process of I do, we do, and you do. I find it more effective in ensuring learners learn in the lesson. And then generalization, which you have to clarify the entire lesson for the benefit of the doubts, right? Then lastly, of course, assessment. This will show if learners met your lesson objectives.
What do you think are the most important component of instructional planning and why?
Actually, all components are important since it is part of the production of an instructional planning. But I think it's the assessment section, for it is where you can assess the final outcome of the lesson and to identify what learning objectives were achieved. Thank you. I hope I hit the right answer of your questions. God bless us all. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time and cooperation. Stay safe and God bless.
Hi everyone, I'm Alana Artenza.
And I am Risa Jane S. Atizo, and today we're going to interview Mr. Junie P. Flores.
He's a school head teacher 3 with 13 years of experience in the field of teaching. Currently, he is assigned as a school head of Bantal Elementary School.
What common issues have you experienced in your profession even before the pandemic?
Based on my experience, one of the issues I encountered that challenged me much is being responsible for the higher learning outcomes. As a school head, I held myself accountable for addressing the diverse needs and learning abilities of my learners. I am trying the best I can to ensure that my learners acquire knowledge, skills, and values which they can apply throughout their lives. Nurturing young minds is not easy. That's why preparedness really matters to me. The lessons should be prepared. Instructional materials are organized, as well as the teaching styles and approaches to be employed prior to the delivery of the topic, because this will hold a great impact in attaining the educational goals and making sure that no learners gets left behind.
And how did you cope up with these issues?
First and foremost, through God's guidance. That's for sure. Also, by manifesting flexibility, being innovative, and being resilient. Because that's how teachers should be. And with the help of my superiors and colleagues, I was able to cope with everything I have gone through in the field of teaching.
How do you consider yourself as a teacher? Beginning, developing, or proficient?
I can consider myself a developing teacher. Although I am already 13 years in service, I earned my master's degree, I cannot say that I am already a veteran. I am still learning. There's a lot of things in this field that I haven't figured out yet. I will not deny that. Learning is a lifelong process indeed.
What are the components of instructional planning?
The components of instructional planning include number 1, knowing what to teach, which means teachers must be knowledgeable about what they are going to teach to the learners. Remember, we can't pour from an empty cup. Basically, how can teachers impart knowledge to their learners when they're also clueless about what to teach? That's totally impossible. The second one is knowing how to teach. This suggests in what way the topic should be delivered or presented. So this includes activities and tasks, teaching styles and strategies that need to be employed, considering the diverse learning abilities, styles, and interests of the learners. And the last one is assessing or the assessment of the child's learning to measure what learners understood, to test what works and what needs to be improved. This will help teachers reflect on their performance as well.
What do you think are the most important components of instructional planning and why?
For me, all the components of instructional planning are equally important. We need to know what and how to teach, as well as how to assess what has been taught.
Thank you so much, sir, for your time. We really appreciate your kindness and cooperation. God bless you.
You are very much welcome. And of course, I want to thank you for this opportunity of having this one or being interviewed by you. It's my honor and privilege to be part of this project in English 1. God bless.
Today is such a productive day for all of us. We have learned so much about instructional planning, right?
Yes.
I hope you guys learned something too.
Thank you and God bless.